Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Stuart Cohen from IGI Cyber Labs. We will get started in just a couple of minutes. We're just waiting for people to log in today's session, but be thinking about questions that you have for our guest speakers today, talking about the evolution of MSPs. What MSPs and MSSPs need to do to help support small and mid-sized businesses, and at the same time, small and medium-sized businesses that have never used an MSP. What should they be looking for? How do we match the two of them together? How does this market come together to help with all the people that are under attack? So we will get started in just a couple of minutes. I just want to thank everybody for attending and for logging in, and we'll just give it a minute or two while we see people logging in. So we have a good group of attendees. We'll go ahead and get started. Once again, for those of you that just logged in, my name is Stuart Cohen. I'm the president of IGI Cyber Labs. For those of you that attended before, this is our ongoing cybersecurity thought leadership series. As you know, we do a couple of these each month, and we've been doing them for about a year now. I think we're almost at the anniversary date of when we did the first one. We've had about 5,000 people register, attend, watch live, or watch the broadcast, the rebroadcast on our YouTube channel. This one will be recorded as well, will be available early next week on YouTube. As always, these are public service announcement and orientation. They are put in place to provide not only MSPs and MSSPs and resellers and agents a perspective on what's going on in the marketplace, but also for small and medium business leaders, owners, investors, board members, and the IT and security folks that work for them. What are a few simple things they can do to help protect their organization? Obviously, with the increase in cybersecurity attacks on all of these organizations, as well as the increased compliance requirements coming out of the different industry groups, plus just board members and investors asking, is my investment protected? Is my data protected? Do I have to worry about, if God forbid something happens, can we recover from a business continuity and business availability standpoint? As well as, what are we doing to educate our team? What are we doing to make things just a little bit safer, make our organization a little bit stronger? So that's the aspect of this. As always, we'd like to make this interactive. We appreciate the people who submitted questions in advance. We will get to your questions in a couple of minutes. We'd like to keep this very social. We'd like to keep it very collaborative. So feel free to put your questions in the chat or put it in the question. We'll do our best to get to all of those today. And then we will follow up with everybody if there's a question that we don't get to. As well as you can go to our LinkedIn events page, ask any questions, collaborate with your peers, and the like. So before we get started, just a couple of things, and we'll just go to the next slide. We do have a couple of upcoming events. We're having conversations with Gradient specifically around how MSPs can better support the SMB cybersecurity community, how the MSP ecosystem is growing, maturing, and helping organizations be more productive. We have our next session on June 22nd with them. We also have the folks from the National Cybersecurity Center talking about what they are doing. We have both Forrest and Mark on board, two industry luminaries and industry thought leaders about what's happening with cybersecurity on things they're doing, not only with the government agencies, but also on their own to help make small businesses be more prepared and ready for things that are going on. And then, as always, once a month, we have an open demo and peer Q&A session. We'll have one of our MSP partners on that call on June 30th. You'll be able to get a demonstration, ask any questions. If you have specific issues around nodeware and continuous scanning, as a lot of people have been doing scanning on a monthly, quarterly, annually, or maybe every Sunday night basis, and things have changed dramatically. But that is That is more of a sales presentation. Today, as I said, is more of a public service announcement and really an opportunity to provide some education. So we're thankful today. Mitch Morgan is the CEO of New Charter Technologies is with us, a large MSP organization that has been growing and growing very rapidly, helping support businesses across the country. So we're appreciative of having him on board and his perspective, as well as Kris Blackmon, who's the Chief Channel Officer at the JS Group, works very closely with MSPs and MSSPs and has great perspective on kind of what's happening in the marketplace. What do MSPs need to do to evolve? What do MSSPs need to provide as the landscape is changing? And also helping them better be prepared to support their clients. So with that, we'll jump right into it. One of the pre-submitted questions we got asked was, and Mitch, I'll start with you and then you can defer it to Kris, is are MSPs and MSSPs having to segment their offerings based on industry verticals for small and medium-sized businesses, or is it just about getting started with cyber hygiene and kind of the same for everybody?
Yeah, that's a great question, Stuart, and a great place to start. As further background, this week we announced the formation of a MSSP, which is called Cyber 74. We just hit the press release on Tuesday. We're excited about it. We've been working on it for some time. We actually had two companies as part of our platform that had dedicated MSSPs with their own brand and their own offerings. We merged them together. So we have a 20-person MSSP that has about $4 million in revenue, which is a pretty good size business within the space. We also have 18 different operating companies is what we call them. Those are MSPs and a total revenue footprint of around $170 million. We've got about 750 employees and around approximately 2,700 managed services accounts. So we see a lot, and we actually do a lot of work surveying our clients and taking a look at industry specializations and vertical markets and things like that to the question that the user provided. We are seeing a number of different industries that are kind of taking the lead here. Obviously manufacturing with any organization that's doing business with the government, and it's hard to be a manufacturer not have some element of what you're doing have a governmental impact. CMMC is really important there. We see a lot of work being done within municipal government, as an example, state and local government. There's a lot of interest there with regard to preservation and moving against the threats that are out there. And there's a lot of money that's being poured in there, a lot of interest that's happening there as well. But in addition to that, we're starting to see through the insurance industry and the requirements for liability insurance, it start to permeate across all industries. So we think that the industries that are most prevalent are those that have the most to protect, obviously, but then also the ones that have governance, whether it's a corporate board or whether it's third-party governance that are requiring people to have policies and adherence to different practices and different programs that are out there that relate to compliance. So focusing on businesses that have the need, in addition to businesses that have the desire to protect themselves is kind of where we see the initial interest, but we see it permeating across all industries today.
Kris, before we come to you, it's interesting. We had Jay Lake from Sin Ventures on just a couple of weeks ago on this session talking about, what are board members, investors, angel investors now starting to require of small businesses they weren't necessarily requiring a couple of years ago. And he made that exact comment. There's a lot more, when they're getting ready to do an investment, it's amazing how the angel investors or the early investors in a small business are now revving up the requirements that they're asking for as it relates to governance, as it relates to, I wouldn't go so far as to call it an audit and subcommittee of the board, but it is close to what audit and compliance organizations in the past have asked organizations. Yep. So you can see that permeating into small business. So it's interesting you mentioned that.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think you're right, Stuart. In fact, I would say that traditionally there's a CPA that sits on the board that's responsible for managing the audit. We see the same things happening with respect to compliance and with respect to security. A lot of organizations that we're doing business with now will require someone to be on the board that has an orientation or has expertise in that area, or they'll ask us to participate in an informal way and provide that type of oversight to the board and recommendations that are associated with it.
Perfect. Kris, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I know you were about to say something.
No, you're fine. Back to kind of the original question about looking at specific verticals. You know, to Mitch's point, we've got different industries that have different regulatory requirements, right? Different compliance requirements. And just the same way that you would look for an MSP that, for example, if you're in healthcare, you want someone who's familiar with HIPAA. If you're in fintech, you want to make sure that you've got those regulations covered. It's the same with security, and probably I would say even a little bit more important, because Mitch and I were talking about this before we came on. There's not a single solution that an MSP is going to be providing for you now or in the years to come that doesn't have security wrapped into it. And so even when you're looking at kind of your base service offerings that you're looking for from an MSP, at this point, they all have security wrapped up in them. And the more that your MSP understands your specific business challenges, your specific industry, they can speak to the board, they can speak to your employees, they've got familiarity there, the more comfortable you probably will be with working with that MSP or that MSSP.
Yeah, to that point, with everybody starting to dabble into some sort of hygiene for cyber, depending upon how it is you want to define cyber hygiene. But we always talk about, and Alan Alford, when he was on our session, talked about the first three legs of the stool are understanding what you have that's vulnerable, providing some multi-factor authentication, and doing a little bit of education for your employees is at least the first step in getting to cyber hygiene. Does that say that all MSPs of the past that were more IT oriented are now, need to be doing a little bit of cyber hygiene at kind of a minimum, kind of a jacks or better?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, Stuart. And I think we have a perspective on that. We have an advanced security group that I mentioned called Cyber 74, which are really the deep end of the pool. And those are the folks that are spending all of their time, 100% of their time on security. I joke about the fact that the cybersecurity engineers think that they are fighting World War III, and in fact, they really are. But that doesn't mean that our MSPs, of which we have 17 of them around North America, are out of the security business. Right. There's a certain element of security that we provide to every client. And then there's the advanced security that we provide to those clients that have specific and pretty deep requirements. And so what we actually did is we created a Venn diagram where on the left-hand side, we've got those offerings that the MSP needs to have. On the far right-hand side are the items that the advanced security group, in our case, Cyber 74, brings. And then there's a place where the circles overlap, and that's kind of a shared responsibility. And so there's actually, as we did the Venn diagram and looked at it, there were 11 individual technology tools on the MSP side. There were 13 on the advanced security side, and there were 9 in the middle. So you can see it gets pretty complicated pretty quickly with regard to all the tools that are required to have a comprehensive strategy. But the other thing that I'd recommend for MSPs that aren't going the advanced security route is to establish relationships with providers that can bring that when you need it, but also be very clear with your client that if you have an incremental offering that's attached to your managed services agreement, it doesn't necessarily mean they're completely covered with respect to all threats that might be out there. And I think that clarity of communication to the end user, many of which are on this call right now, is really important so we could get a clear understanding that it doesn't necessarily cover everything. In fact, if you add up all of those 34 individual tools, it still doesn't cover everything.
Sure.
No matter what happens, there's going to be attacks, and we have to kind of assume somebody's in the building, no matter what the situation is.
And even if it did address everything yesterday, it won't address everything tomorrow.
Exactly right. No question about it. Yeah, and Kris has a really interesting perspective. I mean, we're very fortunate to have her in the industry, and certainly on the call today. I mean, she is a channel person that spends almost all of her time working with the companies that are out there in the community. from a vendor and manufacturer perspective. She's got kind of a 360 view of everything that's going on. And Kris mentioned to me before the call earlier today that there's a lot of new providers that are coming on board that are focused in this security area. So it really is an evolving market with respect to the tool providers, the technology providers, and the providers of these services. So, Kris, what are some of your thoughts around kind of the macro perspective on the industry?
Well, absolutely. To what you just said, the landscape is becoming more and more complicated every day. And I think what both MSPs the vast majority of MSPs in the channel are themselves SMBs. So what they need to understand and need to be able to communicate to their end user, their SMB end user, is that it is super complex. And the more services, the more tools, the more solutions that an MSP offers, the higher their overhead, right? You've got to devote all kinds of time to training, to support. You're now working on integrations, which take up a lot of time and a lot of bandwidth. So the more tools and security services and advanced offerings that an MSP adds on, the higher your costs are going to go up. And a lot of end users need to understand that, MSPs are not coming in trying to just take advantage of them and get more money. They're trying to make sure that the cost that they're charging is covering that overhead. And then, when you look at the MSSP point of view, they have the same problem, right? Or same challenge, I wouldn't call it a problem. Being able to, especially for SMBs, provide that value proposition and really communicate that. And I think we're seeing a lot more, obviously, with the increase in supply chain attacks and the increase in ransomware attacks. And we are seeing a whole lot more SMBs starting to realize the value of those services. But MSPs need to understand that when they're trying to, for lack of a better word, upsell their current clients on a security package, first of all, it can't be optional anymore. MSPs have a responsibility and they have liability now. And I'm sure we're going to be talking about cybersecurity insurance here in a little bit. They've got to be able to, present that to their customer as this isn't really optional, this higher cost. Is something that you're just going to have to absorb. So when we talk about the complexity of the ecosystem, it's kind of impossible to talk about that without also addressing the pricing and the value and all of that kind of comes along with it. So,
right. Yeah. It's interesting if we take a look at the industry, the MSP industry as it's evolved. The term operational maturity has been a really important component of the industry, and it's just getting more efficient at serving our customers and providing for the monitoring and the help desk and the disaster recovery and all the traditional components of a solid network platform that has high degree of uptime and performance. And we're kind of reaching the end of that operational maturity model. I think end users and customers and SMBs are going to be spending more money on technology than before. They're just going to spend it differently. Technology has become much more strategic to all businesses. It's become more relevant for them to be able to provide for internal efficiency as well as serving their own customers better. And so the managed services industry really needs to continue to move forward with those offerings. We did a survey we called Vision Casting with 265 of our clients as a face-to-face survey that our VCIOs did in Q4 of last year. And it was across a number of different categories: collaboration, cloud, security, line of business types of things, as well as technology improvements and enhancements. What came about from that was our clients are moving forward with regard to investing in newer technologies, and we've got to be in a position to move forward with them and help them to take the lead. And as Kris mentioned, any one of those elements has a security overlay with it. I was having a conversation with one of our operating companies earlier today around a cloud conversion that includes a Sage infrastructure, which is an ERP platform out there, and the security element was front and center. When we talk about Teams, or when we talk about SharePoint, or when we talk about any implementation of new technology, cloud and security is always right there in the mix. So anything that we do, there's an umbrella or a wrapper that includes security into that element.
And I think it's important on that note for people to understand too that security itself, you know, when you're talking beyond your basic endpoint and network security that most MSPs offer anyway, security itself is evolving so fast, and overall it's relatively new, right? So you're still seeing providers that, you know, there's a gap in coverage or there's an overlap in coverage, and MSPs trying to figure out like what's the most cost-effective way that I can protect my customers, and trying to figure out how all those different pieces fit together. And that's where MSSPs, when we're talking about advanced security, really have a leg up, and they can offer a lot of advice to MSPs and to their end users in how to kind of form that comprehensive wall to keep everybody protected, while at the same time, you know, trying to make sure all of these different pieces are fitting together right, and you know, they're doing it in a cost-effective way. And it's just the security industry, not only is it so complex, but it's evolving so fast that it adds to that complexity, and we're all just kind of trying to figure out how the puzzle pieces fit together.
Yeah, that's right. And, we
Go ahead, Mitch.
Yeah, we took a look at kind of categorizing the different elements of this kind of the security platform from the standpoint of keeping our clients safe and protected, and we ended up with like 7 or 8: endpoint security, network security, perimeter, human security, cloud, application security, identity and access management, incident response, and then kind of the VCISO function, if you will, the virtual Chief Information Security Officer. And under each of those different categories, there are a number of different bullets or tools or approaches or processes that we take. And so it almost becomes daunting very quickly. And so that's when it really kind of brings home for us in building our own MSSP that we're not going to be able to insource or outsource everything. We're going to have to rely upon the ecosystem. We're going to have to rely upon outstanding vendor relationships. And it's going to be different in the future than it was in the past, where our discussions with the vendor was really about negotiating price and availability. And now it's a true partnership where we have to have a clear understanding of the direction that they're going and make sure that they've got our interests in mind as well, and that they're able to provide an end-to-end. If not an end-to-end, we know where the gaps are, so that we can fill in with a variety of other providers and put together a set of offerings that bring us a comprehensive security package for our clients. And as I mentioned before, that's where Kris is so helpful, you know, to our business as well as to the industry overall, because she's talking with those people every single day and knows who's doing what with regard to not just security, but all the different elements to our vendor fabric and the ecosystems that are taking place and building out as we go forward out there.
So, you know, it leads me to a question we got from somebody that was pre-submitted to us, and they were asking about if I'm working with an MSP that only has certain capabilities and they don't want to work on some of the things that I want them to work on, how do I handle that? So maybe you can answer that from the SMB side, or you can, you know, you mentioned it yourself from the MSP side. If you're an MSP, but you're either not ready, not willing, not financially ready to be a full advanced security provider like you have, how do you straddle that? Who do you partner with? How do you make that work if you don't want to shift everything yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, and that's exactly the question that caused us to form our dedicated managed security company. Each of the individual operating companies are really good at security, and they need to be working on that with their customer every single day, and they do. But there are advanced offerings that we need to have. We need to be able to do penetration testing. We need to have incident response and digital forensics groups that can provide that higher level and deeper involvement. We need to have a SIM and SOC as we go forward, and those are things that you don't necessarily do within the MSP construct. I guess I'd answer the question 2 ways. You know, one, we'll be developing a partner program next year and going outside of our core base of companies, and there are other organizations out there that are, let's call them master MSSPs, that do offer some of those services and some of those capabilities, and some of it's a la carte, and some of it is kind of a comprehensive overall managed security offering. But there's also companies that are in the vendor community that can be your partner and can package these services that you can utilize and be able to take to your customer. It just takes time. I mean, as Kris mentioned, traditionally we've been focused on billable hours and focusing in on how much time we're spending in taking care of clients. we need to allocate a certain amount of our time doing this R&D type of work, researching what's out there. Attending industry events is more important than ever before. Participating in thought leadership events like this to be able to stay current, because like you mentioned, what's current today isn't current tomorrow. So management of MSPs and of organizations that are MSPs or SMB companies as well really need to focus a certain percentage of their time just staying abreast with the trends that are taking place.
It certainly, the biggest reason why our advisory council asked us to put this series together a year ago was because there were so many small and medium business leaders and investors, board members and the like that kind of didn't know what to do and didn't know who to do it with. So part of our public service announcement is just educating them on a couple of simple steps you can take. But the other part is we're providing a matchmaking function for the MSPs to be able to set them up with somebody that can provide them local assistance and local support, because that's not us, but we know that's critically important, just to the all boats rise with the tide as it relates to, 655,000 small businesses in the US, the vast majority of which don't use an MSSP, and are at higher risk every day with the attacks coming their way and the compliance requirements.
Yeah, and going back to the question that you had from your user about how do you address the problem of an MSP not wanting to provide these services. First of all, you've got to go through the same vetting process as you would just bringing the MSP on to your company to handle your IT infrastructure. You want to make sure that they can, again, speak to your business challenges, that they can talk to your board, that they can talk to your customers. You want to make sure that, things like their SLAs align with your expectations. You want to kind of do your basics. But I think what's important to understand is that when we talk about the channel, when we talk about the MSP, the managed services space, we're no longer talking about just a few different channel routes to market. We talk about how the channel has now become an ecosystem, and there are all kinds of different partners and different partner-to-partner collaborations that are going on, because it's just not possible for one technology provider to know and have expertise in every single thing, unless they're massive. And, so when you're vetting an MSP, asking them what kind of partnerships they have out there to supplement their service offerings. If they're just offering you basic endpoint and network security and you're looking to go beyond that, you want to make sure that they have a partnership with either an MSSP or, to your point, another vendor that has API integrations, that they've got some sort of partnership there that can fill that gap. If they don't, then that might be a sign for you to look for a new MSP. Is trying to bring in on your own multiple types of service providers and manage all of those relationships independently just becomes so time intensive, resource intensive. It's super complex and complicated. You're having to play the middleman. You don't want to fall into that trap. It's just a recipe for hemorrhaging revenue before you can turn it into profit for your business. So making sure that your MSP has partnerships like that they have a plan. If they don't want to provide these services for you, that they have a plan to help set you up with somebody who can, and that they're able to kind of facilitate that relationship for you.
Yep.
Well, maybe getting back to kind of at a macro level, and Mitch, maybe you're a great one to kind of start this conversation, but with the vast majority of small and mid-sized businesses that aren't using an MSP or an MSSP, probably either have one or no IT or security person, how do they get started, right? How do they get started to, boy, I need to find somebody to help me?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's interesting. A lot of MSSPs were born out of an MSP, and similar to our situation, and created a separate group with a separate identity, with separate dedicated personnel, because it's often important for the people that are overseeing the security perhaps to be different than those that installed the systems originally. And so that kind of that oversight and the third-party nature of it, as well as the dedicated aspect of it, where they're not installing by day and doing security by night, but they're focusing 110% of their energy on that is really an important element. So for a lot of SMBs and end customers, they should look for that. Look for people that are dedicated at helping me with cloud or helping me with, with the core managed services components, but it's probably going to be a different individual that's going to be focused on the security side of things. So in some cases, there are two relationships that you develop. In some cases, as an example with our company, you can have those two relationships within one New Charter umbrella, but in other situations, you may need to go out there and have people that are focused in the security area, whether it's, to Kris's point, someone that your MSP introduces you to for some of those deeper capabilities, or maybe it's a separate set of agreements that you have that's associated with the security side of the business. It's not necessarily all in one anymore as it relates to your network and your systems and the system's integrity.
And then, Kris, maybe I'll ask you this, but so one of the things that, I found in the last, 12 months since I came on board to run IGI Cyber Labs and Nodeware was a lot of the MSPs don't do a great job of identifying, recruiting, marketing, making people aware of what it is they have to offer and their ability to help. And it's one of the reasons why we give all of our partners, custom registration links so they get a chance to hear people like yourselves, industry icons, industry experts, to provide your thought leadership, because they could never do webinar seminars and webinar series. So we give them the opportunity to let them invite their prospects to hear, the Jay Lakes of the world, the Alan Alfords, the Todd Fitzgeralds, the Ron Rosses, because we can get them on these sessions, and quite frankly, those individual MSPs can't. Are there things that you would suggest just at a macro level the MSP marketplace can do better to educate small businesses on who they are, what they have, what's available, and why they need to go to them?
Yeah, so I think it's important to always remember that the vast majority of MSPs started off as technologists. They didn't start off saying, oh boy, I want to go into the channel when I grow up. They found an affinity with systems and compute and storage and all of that, decided to step out on their own. So they're not great at marketing. They are probably not great at sales. I used to run an organization, a peer group community called the MSP 501, and we did a huge research survey every single year. And it always shocked me. About 2/3 of the MSPs in that community spent under 2% of their revenue on marketing every year. They just don't, they're relying on networking and word of mouth, and they don't know how to get their value proposition out there. So for MSPs, I would suggest a couple of different routes. Partner with somebody, a vendor like yourself, who can help supplement you in that manner. When you're talking to your vendors about marketing enablement that they're offering you, make sure that they understand what it is that you actually need. Too many vendors out there, it just blows my mind. The marketing and enablement that they provide their partners is to sell their partners on their solution. It's not to help their partners sell to the end user. So, it's totally within your purview to demand of your vendors that they, listen to you more and help provide you with those capabilities and those resources. And then you've got to get educated on digital. It's a hard medium to wrap your head around at first, but once you do, then it's just the value to your business. If you're able to, optimize LinkedIn, if you're able to do social selling, if you're able to, promote webinars like this one or thought leadership like this one, to your customer base or to your prospects, just leveraging the power of digital is something that too many MSPs are so far behind on. So many of them don't even have websites that are optimized for SEO or hyper localized for their specific markets. So being able to kind of, educate yourself and ask your vendors for help too. There are MDF programs out there that will teach you about, how to market yourself digitally. JSG runs several of them. And so, it's just being able to educate yourself on how people market themselves effectively today in a digital age will put you far ahead of a lot of your competition, because they just aren't pouring resources into educating themselves about that.
Yeah, it reminds me, one of the very first sessions we did was with Todd Fitzgerald, who's the author of the CISO Compass. And we had Ron Ross on with him from one of the fellows at NIST, and they were talking about, how cybersecurity has changed and the requirements that NIST has put on, and, how stage 4 data gathering is a place to get started. And I went to one of our MSP partners who's literally located in 2 states, right? And I said, we have a bunch of leads of people that have come to one of these webinars. Would you like those? And they said, sure, we would love those, because leads are our biggest issue. We don't know how to do marketing. We don't know how to follow up on those. And we gave them 75 people that attended the webinar with Todd Fitzgerald and Ron Ross, who said they would like to be matched made to an MSP. And we went back, 2 weeks later, and then 4 weeks later, and 6 weeks later, and said, how are you doing on those? Well, we're still trying to figure out how we're going to reach out to them. We're still going to try and figure out how we're going to follow up with them, right? And that just gets back to, it just overemphasized to us why we needed to do this series, why we needed to educate the end user, small business leaders, and then how do we need to help the MSPs grow with that desire and that need.
Yeah, and Stuart, you're providing a very valuable service. Thank you for that. When we spend a lot of time with our clients and with this person that we call a VCIO, or Virtual Chief Information Officer. It's a trusted advisor, the one that's responsible for kind of looking out for the client's behalf and connecting their business goals with technology is what we try and do. And we really communicate with them that they need to just educate our clients. Don't worry about selling anything. The clients are going to be determining what makes best sense for them through being educated about what the options are, educated in this case about what the risk elements are and the ways in which they can protect themselves, and educate about what some of the impacts are from not protecting yourself, and that takes you into a place where, to Kris's point, you become a thought leader. And you become valuable, and people come to you for your knowledge and resources. And when Kris describes, using digital media and using social capabilities, we don't do that to try and send spam emails out or to try and do cold calling programs. We do that to educate, whether it's our clients or whether it's our prospective clients or specific industry areas. And as long as you do the education and do a professional job with it, the business will flow just based upon the dialogue that you're able to establish through those educational elements.
We have to remember the buyer's journey today, that so many, 76%, something like that, of the actual, choosing your provider, choosing your product, or whatever the case may be, the research is done before you ever talk to a salesperson. Yes. So, you got to go out there and you've got to Mitch's point, and New Charter does a fabulous job with this, by the way. Mitch is on stage all the time. He's in publications, he's online, and webinars like this, just talking about the state of the industry, providing that education. And then that's when, people will remember, oh, that's right. I heard this one person talk about this, or, now I have a question that this webinar, brought up. I'm going to send it in and, hope I get a response. And that starts to build that relationship. It's providing that value before you ever start talking about an actual sales transaction.
Yeah, and Stuart, back to your original concept, I think that's really, really interesting. When we did our vision casting work with 265 of our clients, it was amazing that 76% of those clients said that they rated on a 1 to 5 scale security as an area that was either a 4 or a 5, with the majority of that being 5s. this is a topic that everyone wants to talk to you about. And if you can bring something valuable to the table, don't worry about whether they want to see me or not. Once the conversation gets started, and they understand that you have some expertise that you can provide, everybody's concerned about this area. To Kris's point about speaking, I spoke at a bankers conference. I was as a 10-year banker, and I was talking with them about digital transformation elements and things that relate to their particular industry. And I brought with me a gentleman that was a very deep expert in the security market. No one wanted to hear what I had to say. Everyone wanted to talk to the security specialist, because that's where everybody's mind is right now. And what we need to do as an industry is open that discussion and that dialogue, because the audience is welcoming that, because there's a lot of uncertainty out there. There's a lot of fear out there, and people are looking for answers, and everyone has questions. There's no question about that.
Well, it's just interesting to see how it evolved. A year ago when I got here, I met some. I thought we would provide Nodeware to people that had never done a vulnerability management scan. Quite frankly, that the light bulb was going to come on, that was going to say, "Boy, I better find out what devices in my network are vulnerable, which ones are connected to, critical data, and oh, by the way, I better find out when a new device shows up on my network, because I've never done that. I've never cared about it. I never thought the bad guys would find me, but now I'm a little bit more concerned than I was." And I thought Nodeware would only go to somebody who'd never done a vulnerability management scan. But now what's interesting is we're getting MSPs that we talked to 6 months ago that said, we have one of your competitors, and we run monthly scans, annual scans, even Sunday night scans when nobody's at work. But now we're getting a requirement to do, continuous scanning during normal business hours, because interesting enough, their clients are now saying, if my critical data is going to be at risk on a daily basis, I got to make sure I'm doing a vulnerability management scan on a daily basis. So we're finding that Nodeware is going in to be very complementary to a lot of MSPs that are using one of our competitors,
right,
on a monthly basis, annual basis, weekly basis, and keeping those contracts in place to do that, while at the same time now using Nodeware during normal business hours, and they're using the two kind of complementary, and it gives them a nice kind of a la carte way to say,
Yep.
Do you want to know on a daily basis what's happening to your network, or do you want to know on a weekly basis or a monthly basis? And
right.
It doesn't make the MSP feel like they have to change what they told the client a year ago.
Right, that's exactly right. There's a school of thought in terms of the value proposition. This is really a cost of doing business for every business in America. And it needs to be budgeted. Funds need to be allocated for it. Time and attention needs to be spent on it. And it's like the utility bills and the water bills and the rent. You just have to pay it. It's part of the business proposition. And if not, then the alternatives are not going to be very, very fortunate for those that choose not to invest. And we did a study as we were establishing our security business, and in the market, the average for MSSPs, if it's a package bundled all-inclusive offering, is between $900 and $300 per month per user, which is like an astounding number to think about. And the lowest that we saw out there was $75 per user. And these are companies that are providing enterprise grade, down to the middle market, if you will, security offerings. And the businesses that are utilizing these offerings recognize that there's a cost associated with this technology and the tools and the experts that bring these tools to the market. And so it's something that if you're on the call today and you're a small or medium-sized business end user, take a look at this in your budget cycles and incorporate this into just the standardized cost of doing business as we go forward. We're all in a kind of an inflationary environment right now, and we can sometimes pass cost increases on to customers and things along those lines. But it's another layer of protection, but we also need to be investing in order to be able to have that layer of protection, as you mentioned, Stuart.
And I think people are seeing that.
That cost for those extra security services is a heck of a lot cheaper than the cost of a data breach. That's going to, cost your company. To Mitch's point, it is an investment that is going to, save you time and resources in the long run.
Well, it's interesting that COSN, the Consortium of School Networks, just had their large conference. 3,000 or 4,000 different security school districts around the country came to their national conference, and we just talked to one of their school districts recently. You know, they have 100,000 devices in their school district between the kids' Chromebooks and the faculty and staff and servers and the like, and it takes them 4 to 4.5 months to scan every device once, and so they've come to the conclusion, you know, we have got to go to daily scanning or weekly scanning of at least the critical pieces of our data that are connected to critical information, because we're never going to be able to explain to the superintendents and to the state folks what we're doing from a school district standpoint. So if a K through 12 organization can start thinking about, boy, we need to do this much more on a continuous, regular basis, because the information we have, you know, parents, donors, information, kids, families, the like, is so important to us. You can only see how that needs to resonate into what businesses need to do to protect their critical information.
Yep, that's right.
And it's like, you know, any business these days, there are so many things coming on the network, going off the network. It's not like, you know, it's not like the past where you have your desktop and, you know, a router and maybe a on site or a data center somewhere. There are so many mobile devices coming on and off the network. And then you take those devices and now everybody is taking those to their home networks to work remotely. And so now you've got a whole other set of challenges. One of the things that I love about Nodeware is that, you know, if you do have some highly personal sensitive information or an executive or, you know, something like that, that is, you know, going home to work on their home network, it'll help monitor that network as well, instead of just, you know, the office environment. And
well,
you know,
I was just going to say, you know, you talk about take it home. You know, there were days where we used to actually take a corporate device and take it home and work from home. Now, you know, now we are sitting in our homes with our corporate devices, all accessed by our home Wi-Fi, connecting to our own critical data, right? And that's the reality in the hybrid workforce for so many people right now.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. Yep. So I asked the CEO of our security business to give me a little bit of his perspective, and he gave me 3 principles that he thinks that I should convey. And you know, he's spent a lot of time in the security business and spends a lot of time, you know, focusing on, you know, what good looks like. And the first was different threats require different protective measures. The second one was, you know, all protective measures have weaknesses and vulnerabilities. So a layered approach, we call it a programmatic approach to security is necessary. And then the third thing, which is really important, is that we can't assume we'll be able to keep all the threats out. So threat isolation, detection, and remediation are as important as prevention. So you need to focus your energy equally on that, because the reality of it is it's going to happen. Not to everybody, but to many people, and unfortunately an increasing number of those people. And so with that in mind, as a construct, we developed our offering, which is called Tungsten Complete. And in the managed services world, it's to have an all-you-can-eat, if you will, which we think provides as comprehensive of an offering as we can get. And for those that are on the call, it's not a commercial, but if you want to take a look at the website, it's Cyber74 is the name of the company, and there's an offering called Tungsten Complete. And I only ask you to look at that because there's some really smart people, smarter than me about security, have architected an offering that incorporates all the things we think are important. So whether you're an end user customer or whether you're a managed service provider, as an example, we have 7 vectors of protection. And so the network, human, cloud, application, identity, perimeter, and endpoint, focus on those 7 as the places that you want to focus on. So building out your platform, borrow ours in terms of how we constructed it in order to be able to use it for yourself if you're an IT professional managing your own environment, or whether you're an MSP that's looking to construct an all-inclusive offering for your customers under an advanced security type of an approach.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Mitch, we literally a question just popped up on that, and I'm sure it was related to exactly what you said. Is, you know, if I'm a small business with a limited budget and not much support from my CEO, you know, how can I get started? And will the MSP provide some sort of a la carte for me to get started?
Yes. That's a great question. the first thing that I would do is I would make sure that you're spending time educating your CEO, right? And you know, I've been doing technology roadmaps for CEOs for 9 or 10 years, and business owners and CEOs are increasingly oriented toward technology as an enabler and a driver. And most CEOs are extremely important in threats and security protections and things like that. So get your MSP partner if you have one, and have them help you to educate. You know, the second thing that we're working on with all of our clients is endpoint detection. EDR, MDR, XDR are kind of the industry acronyms that people use. And if we can get to a place where 100% of our clients have got a solution like that for endpoint detection, we think we're going to be significantly safer. You know, multi-factor authentication is obviously important. You know, there's a number of different elements that you need to look at as kind of cost of doing business or table stakes, and those are two of the ones that I think should be most prevalent today. Kris, what do you think about that in terms of what do you think the end customer, the end user ought to be thinking about if they're running an internal IT and maybe don't have a whole lot of time, expertise, or budget that they can allocate?
I mean, I think you're right. Educating the decision makers is, you know, really important. But if you are an IT manager and you've been trying to educate your CEO for all of this time and they're still not coming on board, trying to work with your MSP to try to find some different ways to partner together. Is there a way that I can take help desk responsibilities away from you and you can provide the security so that our costs are going up just a little bit, right? Or whatever the case may be. It's again, trying to figure out these different forms of partnerships. You know, I had a boss once, and I'm sure everyone has heard this phrase, but lived and died by the phrase, don't bring me a problem, bring me a solution. So if the CEO's objection is the increased cost, then sit down and work with your MSP and try to figure out how you can, you know, mitigate that. You know, and the other piece of it is that, you know, SMBs, so many of them have this mindset that cyber attackers are only going after the big guys. They're not going to bother with us. But statistics show that that's just not the case anymore. Stuart and I were talking, depending on what report you read, somewhere around like 70% of MSPs have a client that's been attacked and that they've had to remediate. And you know, so to Stuart's point earlier, 655,000 SMBs in the United States, only a small fraction of them are actually using an MSP. So what's happening to the rest of these guys, right? So, you know, education is key, but, you know, at a certain point, you've got to come with a solution, not the problem.
So we got a couple of minutes. What I'd like to do is, we've got a couple of things coming up I want to just remind people about. And then what I'd like to do is kind of turn it over to, you know, Kris and Mitch, give you a couple of minutes to, you know, provide kind of some leave behind or some comments on it. And also some perspective, right? If you're an MSP, what can you do to be better and stronger and more prepared for what's happening in the marketplace as we make all boats rise with the tide? And if you're a small business trying to figure out what you ought to do next, you know, what are some questions you could ask, how you could go about it? Just to remind people that we have the session coming up with Gradient, helping MSPs and the MSP ecosystem be stronger and better. We'll have that on the 22nd. We've got the National Cybersecurity Center coming up with Mark and with Forrest. We also have one that's not on here with Bradford Wilkie, who's a senior fellow and senior advisor at CISA, talking about what CISA is doing from a government standpoint to help small businesses be better prepared for the cybersecurity attacks, which has been a phenomenal series for us in the past. We've had CISA on a couple of different times. We've had the Small Business Administration on a couple of times as to how they can help businesses be better prepared and some of the offerings they have. And then we have our live demo coming up at the end of the month to provide questions as well. So those are the things that we have. We did get one question that we will get to in a second. Oh, it's specifically about replays. Yes, the answer is We will have the replay, the recording will be available. It will be available on our YouTube channel. You'll be able to get to that. And also, if you want to get connected to us or get connected to either one of the speakers, you can reach out to us on our website or any follow-on information, and we'll get you connected to the right people. So, Kris, why don't we go to you first? Any thoughts you have that you want to leave the audience with as to what they should do from the next steps? And then we'll let Mitch kind of close everything out.
Yeah, so I think both from the end user perspective and the MSP perspective, we have to, as an ecosystem, understand the increasing complexity that comes along with cybersecurity and, having that end-to-end protection, and that there is a price and a cost that comes with that. SMBs, our end users, have got to, understand, to Mitch's point a little bit ago, that it's an investment, and it's not optional anymore. And MSPs have to understand that same thing. And more and more governmental organizations, cybersecurity insurance providers, they're not looking at the end customer for liability anymore. They're looking for you. They're looking for the people who are entrusted with protecting that data for end customers. So it's no longer, something that an MSP can say, hi, Mr. Customer, if you don't mind, I'd like to talk to you about this cybersecurity offering. And, I really think that, is it too expensive? That's fine. We'll talk about it again next quarter. It's not anything that's optional anymore. You have to have that hard conversation with your end customers, with your clients, and realize that it's not just for protecting them, it's for protecting you and your business as well.
Yeah, those are great points, Kris. And you've got such a phenomenal view of the channel and of the technology providers that are out there. Fortunately, I think we're in a situation that people are meeting again, and it gives us a great opportunity to interact with the vendor community and the ecosystem, not just in forums like this, but, most of the companies that are on the call today are part of some form of ecosystem. Whether it's an industry group or whether it's a partner group in the MSP world, we all know who those are. Spend some extra time cultivating those relationships. Spend extra time with organizations like Stuart's organization to learn how they go about what they're doing and what their strategies are. And like I mentioned, it's not just about price, availability, and features of the offerings. It's about the strategic direction and the nature that the business is going to as they go forward. Those partnerships are extremely important. And if you have the right vendors, they'll educate you. And if they're not educating you, they're probably not the right vendors. And the companies like Stuart's company, invest in these relationships and truly do see it as a two-way partnership, and they're doing their portion just like we're doing today with regard to making sure that good information is out there in the public domain in the nature of thought leadership. I'd also say that none of this is ever going to be once and done. You're not going to be able to solve the issues by deploying today's technology. It's going to be an ongoing organic nature to it, and we got to be committed to it and committed to ongoing education for ourselves and being able to take those kinds of tools to our clients. Don't look at it as just software tools or threat protection tools, monitoring tools. Look at it as a program. We want to offer an entire program to our clients that has a number of different elements to it. First of all, assume the enemy's already inside the gates and be thinking about ways in which we're going to remediate the threat that's already there. And look at the events in the context of the entire system, of the entire network, not in terms of them in an isolated environment. I mean, our goal is to get them isolated, but a lot of these threats do emanate throughout the platform, and we've got to be able to take a look at things on a holistic basis and update your program no less than annually, and look at it that way. And if you're an MSP, roll it out to your clients and say, okay, we're ready for, in January, let's say, the 2023 version of our program, which takes into consideration all of the elements that we've been researching on your behalf for the last 12 months, so for the last 3 months, that we're using to be able to update our offerings to be able to stay current with you and have you be able to stay current with what's happening within the market. So look at it as a journey, because it's never going to end, unfortunately, but there's an opportunity there for us to keep systems safe, and keep high performance going if we do spend our time keeping ourselves educated as we go forward.
Mitch, Kris, thank you both very much. I really appreciate it. One thing I'll leave the MSPs with that are on the call, we've had a lot of our partners take advantage of a independent third-party risk assessment or pen test that we've used either out of our sister organization at IGI Cybersecurity Services or one of our partners, Security Studio, that does independent third-party security assessments. And MSPs have been able to take advantage of those third-party work and then turn around and take the output of that work to make recommendations as to how they could offer new services to their clients. So not only be thinking about what you could do, but how you could use an independent event to provide you kind of the credibility and expertise to be able to offer more things. That's also a great way to educate your clients and your prospects about what's needed. So with that, I want to thank everybody for their time. We're at the top of the hour. Mitch and Kris, thanks so much for participating today. We will follow up with everybody. It's also going to be on YouTube. And if you have any follow-on questions, please submit them to us or come into the LinkedIn event session and collaborate with your peers. Thank you for your time today. And thank you very much for your time. Mitch, were you going to say something?
Appreciate it. No, thank you for attending. And Kris, great to be with you.
Always fun to talk to you, Mitch.
Thank you both so much. Really appreciate it. We'll see everybody in a couple of weeks. Thank you again.
Take care.